It was supposed to be just one night. The storm had caught me on the road, my car broken down miles from town. When I knocked on that old farmhouse door, I wasn't expecting anyone to answer. But he did. A man built by the land itself. Broad shoulders, rough hands, and eyes that carried both kindness and danger. He said I could stay the night in the barn, just until the rain passes. But when the thunder roared and the night grew colder, I heard the creak of the wooden door opening again. What happened after changed the way I saw him, and myself, forever. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. Because what you're about to hear is a story about warmth, found in the coldest of places, and a kind of love that no storm could wash away. The rain came down like it had been waiting for me. Sheets of water blurred the dirt road until it was just a smear of brown under my tires. My phone had no signal. The engine coughed once, and then gave up completely. I sat there, listening to the storm pound the roof until I realized the car had become a cage of cold. When I stepped outside, the wind bit through my jacket. I pulled it tight and looked around, just trees, endless fields, and in the distance a faint yellow glow. A farmhouse. It looked old, like it had been standing against storms longer than anyone alive. By the time I reached the porch, I was soaked to the bone. My knock barely carried through the rain, but after a moment, the door opened. He stood there, the man who would change everything. He was tall, easily over 6 feet, with a build that came from real work, broad chest, arms, like they could split wood with one swing. His hair was dark and wet from sweat or rain, and his jaw was dusted with stubble that framed lips too soft for someone who looked that hard. His eyes, deep brown and steady, studied me in silence. "You lost?" he asked, voice low, roughened by years of early mornings and long days. "My car died a few miles back. I needed somewhere dry until the rain stops." He nodded once, stepping aside. "You can stay in the barn. It's not much, but it's dry." I thanked him, though my voice shook from the cold, or maybe from the way his gaze lingered a second longer than it should. He handed me an old oil lantern, lit and flickering. "Stay close to the fence line, don't wander. The mud's deep this time of year." I walked toward the barn, the light dancing in the rain, the storm echoing across the valley. The structure loomed out of the darkness. Old wood, the smell of hay and earth, the hum of distant thunder. Inside it was quiet, except for the rain tapping on the roof. I found an empty stall, threw down an old blanket from a hay bale, and sat. My body was shaking uncontrollably, but there was something else under the chill. A pulse in my chest that hadn't been there before. I couldn't stop thinking about him. The way he had looked at me, not just with curiosity. There was something deeper, something restrained. I told myself I was imagining it. Minutes stretched into hours. I tried to sleep, but the cold air and the storm made it impossible. My mind wandered to the life I'd left behind in the city, to the emptiness I hadn't been able to name until that moment. Then I heard it, the creak of the barn door. I froze. The light from another lantern spilled into the space, and his shadow moved along the wooden walls before he appeared again. He looked different in the lantern glow, less distant, more human. His shirt clung to his chest, soaked through, and his hands were red from the cold. "You'll catch your death in here," he said, walking closer. "The wind cuts through worse than it sounds." "I'm fine," I replied softly, though I wasn't. My voice trembled. He looked at me for a long moment before setting the lantern down beside me. The glow softened his features, casting gold across the rough lines of his face. "You look half frozen," he said. "Here." He unbuttoned his flannel shirt and handed it to me. The fabric was warm, still carrying his scent, smoke, leather, and something earthy. I hesitated, but he gave a small nod, like he wasn't asking. He was insisting. "Thanks," I murmured, slipping it on. His eyes dropped briefly to how it fit me, the sleeves hanging loose, the hem brushing my thighs. When our eyes met again, he looked away quickly. "What's your name?" he asked. "Evan." "Name's Luke." He crouched down across from me, resting his arms on his knees, studying the ground as if afraid to meet my gaze. The silence between us stretched, filled with the sounds of rain and our uneven breathing. "You live here alone?" I asked, trying to sound casual. He nodded. "Been that way for years. Easier that way." "Easier?" He finally looked up. His expression softened, but his eyes carried something heavy. "When you stop expecting people to stay, you stop getting disappointed." His words hit me deeper than they should have. I wanted to say something back, something to ease that quiet ache in his voice, but all that came out was, "I know what that feels like." For a second, neither of us looked away. The air between us grew warmer, heavier. Then the thunder rolled again, shaking the walls. He stood abruptly, brushing the dirt from his jeans. "Get some rest. The rain will stop by morning." He started toward the door, but before he reached it, he stopped and turned halfway back, eyes catching mine through the dim light. "You can stay as long as you need," he said quietly, then almost too softly to hear. "Good night, Evan." The door creaked shut behind him. But I couldn't sleep, because for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel alone. And something in his voice told me he didn't either. The first thing I noticed when I woke up was the quiet. The rain had stopped. The air inside the barn felt still, like the world had paused to catch its breath after a long night. Rays of sunlight slipped through the cracks in the wooden walls, cutting through the haze and dust, warming the straw where I lay. For a moment, I thought it had all been a dream, the storm, the farmer, the strange pull between us. But then I felt it. The flannel shirt still clinging to my skin, his scent faint but undeniable. Smoke and earth. Luke. I pushed myself up, stretching the stiffness out of my arms. Outside, the world had turned golden. Mist rose from the fields, and the smell of wet soil filled the air. Somewhere nearby, I heard a rooster crow. I stepped out of the barn and saw him. Luke was already awake, of course. He stood near the fence, fixing a loose post with a hammer in one hand and a cigarette hanging from his lips. The morning light hit him just right, tracing every hard line of muscle through his plain gray t-shirt. His jeans were tucked into boots covered in mud. He looked like the kind of man who belonged to the earth, molded by it, unshaken by anything that came his way. When he saw me, he paused just long enough to take me in. "Morning," he said, voice deep and steady, smoke curling into the air. "Morning." I hesitated, rubbing the back of my neck. "Thanks for, letting me stay." He gave a short nod. "You were half drowned. Didn't seem right to leave you out there." I smiled, but he didn't. Not fully. His eyes softened, though, and that was somehow better. "Come on," he said finally. "Coffee's on." Inside the farmhouse, it was warmer than I expected. Simple, neat, but lived in. The smell of coffee and old wood filled the air. He poured a cup and slid it toward me without a word. I noticed how his hands were nicked and calloused, the kind that told stories of years spent working, fixing, enduring. "Guess you don't get many visitors out here," I said, taking a sip. He chuckled quietly. "Guess not. Most folks drive right past. Don't have much reason to stop." I looked around. "It's peaceful. Feels like the world's quieter here." He leaned against the counter, crossing his arms. "Sometimes too quiet." Our eyes met again. The silence between us wasn't awkward. It was heavy, charged. Like there were words hovering in the air that neither of us dared to say. "So, where were you headed?" he asked finally. "Honestly," I sighed. "Nowhere, really. Just driving, trying to clear my head." He studied me. "You running from something?" I almost laughed. "You sound like you've asked that before." "Maybe," he said softly, "because I know the look." That made me pause. I wasn't sure what he meant, but it hit too close to home. "What look?" "The one people get when they've been trying to find something that doesn't exist," he said, his tone low and even. "Peace, maybe, or someone who understands them." I didn't say anything. I couldn't, because he was right. The kettle whistled softly behind him, but neither of us moved. For a second, all I could hear was my heart beating in my ears. He turned away first. "Come on," he said, breaking the tension. "You look like you could use a hot meal." We ate in near silence, except for the sound of forks against plates. Every now and then our eyes would meet, and every time something in me would pull tighter. After breakfast, he showed me around the farm. The horses watched us with lazy curiosity as we walked past the stables. The air was still cool and clean, carrying the scent of hay and dew. "You built all this yourself?" I asked. "Most of it," he said. "My dad started it, but I took over when he passed." "I'm sorry," he shrugged. "That's life. You work the land. It takes what it wants from you." He said it like a man who'd learned to accept loss without letting it crush him. But I could feel the loneliness in his voice, quiet and deep, like roots buried too far down to dig up. We stopped near the edge of the field. A broken tree branch lay across part of the fence. Luke set down his gloves and reached for it, muscles tightening as he lifted it. I stepped forward instinctively. "Here, let me help," he shook his head. "It's fine. Come on, you don't have to do everything alone," I said. That made him stop. He looked at me again, really looked. Then he gave a faint smile, small but real. "Stubborn," he muttered. "Guess that makes two of us." Together we heaved the branch aside. When it fell, the sound echoed through the valley. I laughed, breathless, and when I turned to him, he was already watching me. For a second, neither of us moved. The world around us disappeared. The field, the wind, even the sky. It was just him and me. The distance between us seemed to shrink, drawn by something unspoken. Then suddenly his radio crackled from his back pocket, a sound that shattered the moment. He stepped back quickly, rubbing his neck. "I should check the horses," he said, his voice uneven. "Luke, I started," but he was already walking away. I stood there, my heart still pounding. Something had changed. I could feel it. The walls he'd built so carefully had cracked just a little, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to break through them, or if I already had. That night the storm was gone, but something heavier hung in the air. The silence wasn't calm anymore. It felt alive, like the world was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Luke had said goodnight early. He'd stayed busy all afternoon, repairing fences, feeding the horses, fixing things that didn't seem broken. I could tell he was avoiding me, and that only made me think about him more. Every glance, every quiet word from earlier replayed in my mind. The way he'd looked at me when I laughed, the way he'd stepped back after the radio interrupted. It all burned in my chest. I couldn't sleep. I tossed on the thin blanket in the barn, staring up at the beams above. The air smelled like hay and rain. The moonlight spilled through the cracks in silver slashes, and I found myself wishing he'd come back like he had that first night. But he didn't. Hours passed. I thought about leaving in the morning, about walking back to town and pretending this strange connection had never happened. But part of me already knew I wouldn't. I didn't want to. Something about this place, about him, felt like gravity, pulling me in quietly and powerfully. I finally stood, restless. The farmhouse light was still on. Without thinking, I made my way there, boots crunching softly on the wet gravel. The front door was half open, the warm glow of lamplight flickering inside. I stepped in and found him sitting at the kitchen table, elbows resting on his knees, his head bowed. The cigarette in his hand burned low, a line of ash ready to fall. He looked up when he heard me. "Couldn't sleep?" I shook my head. "Neither could you," he gave a quiet grunt. Not agreement, not denial. He took a slow drag, then put out the cigarette and leaned back. "Didn't mean to wake you." "You didn't," I said softly, stepping closer. "I just didn't want to be alone." His eyes met mine across the table. The distance between us felt heavier than ever. "You're not alone," he said, barely above a whisper. For a second I thought he'd stand, thought he'd close that space between us. But he didn't. He looked away, jaw tightening like he was fighting himself. "Luke," I said quietly, "you keep looking at me like there's something you want to say." He chuckled under his breath, shaking his head. "You've got a wild imagination." "I don't think I do." That made him look up again. His eyes weren't cold this time. They were full of conflict, fire and fear all at once. "You don't know what you're talking about," he said, voice low, almost pained. "Then tell me," I said, moving closer. "Tell me what I don't know." He stood abruptly, pushing the chair back with a scrape. "Evan, stop." But I didn't. I took another step. "Why?" "Because it's easier to pretend you don't feel it." His breath hitched just slightly, but I caught it. "You should go back to the barn." "No," I said. My voice was steadier than I felt. "Not until you tell me I'm wrong." For a moment, the only sound was the soft hum of rain, still dripping from the eaves outside. He stared at me like he was trying to build a wall in his mind, something to hold everything back. But I could see the cracks. I could see him breaking. He took a slow step forward, closing the space between us. I could feel his breath, the heat rolling off his body. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like the whole room could hear it. "Evan," he said again, but his voice was different now, softer, lower, trembling. I swallowed hard. "Say it." His eyes darted over my face, lingering for half a second on my lips before meeting my eyes again. "You don't know what you're asking for." "Yes, I do." And then he stopped fighting. It wasn't a sudden thing. It was slow, deliberate, like he'd finally surrendered to something that had been clawing at him for too long. His hand lifted, fingers brushing my jaw, the calluses rough against my skin. I felt the tremor in his touch, the hesitation, but also the need. "Damn it," he breathed, closing his eyes. When he kissed me, it wasn't gentle. It was desperate, years of silence breaking all at once. The chair behind me scraped against the floor as I stumbled back, catching myself against the table. His hand gripped the edge beside my hip, the other sliding behind my neck, holding me there like he was afraid I'd disappear. I didn't. I couldn't. When he finally pulled away, we were both breathless. His eyes were wide, as if realizing what he'd just done. "This can't happen," he said, stepping back. "Then why did you—" "Because I couldn't stop myself," he snapped, then stopped, shaking his head. "You should go, before I make another mistake." It didn't feel like a mistake. "Evan." His voice was low, warning, but also breaking. "You don't understand. I've built my life on control, on keeping things in order. This," he gestured between us, his hand trembling, "this ruins everything. Or maybe it's the first thing that ever made sense," I said quietly. He stared at me, breathing hard, chest rising and falling beneath his shirt. Then he turned away, running a hand through his hair. "You don't know what I've done," he said. "You don't know what kind of man I really am." "Then tell me," I said. "Let me find out." But he didn't answer. Instead, he reached for his jacket and walked toward the door. The screen creaked open, letting in the cool night air. He stood there for a long moment, rain dripping from the roof, before finally saying, "Go back to the barn. Evan, please." And then he stepped out into the dark. I stood there, my heart pounding, his taste still on my lips, whatever had started between us. It wasn't over, but something told me it might not end the way I hoped. The morning sun crept through the slats of the barn, slicing across my face and pulling me out of the kind of sleep that doesn't rest you. It just keeps you from thinking too much. My lips still burned from the night before. Every time I blinked, I saw Luke's face again, his trembling hand, the regret in his eyes right after he kissed me. He wasn't there. The truck was gone. The air around the farmhouse felt different, empty in a way that made my chest tighten. I tried to tell myself it didn't mean anything, that maybe he'd just gone into town early. But deep down, I knew he was running. By noon, I couldn't take the silence anymore. I found him in the south field, hammering new boards into the fence like the world depended on it. His shirt was soaked with sweat, his jaw clenched tight. "Luke," I called. He froze for a moment before turning. "You should be resting," he said flatly. "I didn't sleep much." He nodded once, going back to work. "That's not my problem." "Yes, it is," I said, stepping closer, "because you can't pretend last night didn't happen." The hammer stopped mid-swing. He kept his back to me, breathing hard. "You don't understand what you're saying, Evan." "I understand exactly. You kissed me." He turned slowly then, eyes hard but glistening with something he couldn't hide. You think that meant something? You think one mistake changes who I am? It wasn't a mistake, I said quietly. He dropped the hammer, its clang echoing through the open field. You don't know me, he said. You don't know what I've done, what this uniform means. I can't afford to feel anything, I interrupted. To be human. He looked at me like he wanted to yell, or maybe break, or both. But before he could speak, the sound of tires crunching over gravel pulled our attention. A sheriff's truck rolled up the dirt road. Dust rose behind it in a slow golden cloud. Luke stiffened instantly. "Stay here," he said under his breath. "Who is it?" He didn't answer. Just wiped his hands on his jeans and started walking toward the truck. Two men got out, one in uniform, one in plain clothes with a clipboard. The man in uniform nodded. "Morning, Sergeant Turner." Luke's posture changed, his back straight, his voice firm. "Sheriff, didn't expect you today. Just doing rounds. We got reports of a stray vehicle near Route 17 last night. Figured I'd check your property, make sure everything's all right." Luke's jaw tightened. "Everything's fine." The sheriff looked past him, right toward me. "Who's the kid?" Luke's hesitation lasted a heartbeat too long. "Drifter," he said finally. "Got caught in the storm. I let him stay the night." The man nodded slowly, his eyes still on me. "Generous of you." Luke forced a faint smile. "Just doing what's right." After a few more words, the men left, the sound of the truck fading into the distance. Luke stood there long after they were gone, staring at the dirt road like it might betray him. "You lied for me," I said softly. He turned. "I lied to protect you and to protect myself. You don't get what it means if word gets out that I let someone stay here, much less—" He stopped himself, clenching his fists. "Much less what?" I asked. "Much less that you kissed me?" His eyes snapped to mine, sharp and wounded. "Stop!" I took a step forward. "No. You keep telling me to stop, but you're the one who started it." He exhaled shakily, looking away. "Evan, I can't be that man. Not here, not in this uniform." "Then what are you? Because you don't act like someone who doesn't care." For a long moment he said nothing. The wind moved through the grass, the sound of a hawk overhead slicing through the quiet. Finally he muttered, "You're young. You think everything you feel is supposed to mean something. But out here, feelings get men killed." "Maybe," I said, stepping closer, "but denying them kills you slower." He looked at me then, really looked at me, and something broke behind his eyes. He took a step forward, closing the distance between us until I could feel the heat from his body, smell the mix of sweat and dust and fear. "Evan," he said, voice rough, "you need to go." "No." He exhaled through his nose, shaking his head. "You don't know what happens to people like me. You don't know what happens to soldiers who cross lines they shouldn't." "Then show me," I whispered. "Show me what you're afraid of." He stared at me like he wanted to, like part of him wanted to burn down the world just to feel free for a second. His hand twitched at his side, but he didn't move. The radio from his truck suddenly crackled to life. A dispatcher's voice came through. Something about a missing suspect, a vehicle matching mine spotted near the woods. Luke's head snapped toward the sound. Then his eyes found mine. "They're looking for you," he said quietly. I froze. "What?" He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You didn't tell me everything, did you?" I shook my head slowly. "It's not what you think." Then, "Tell me what it is," he said, but his tone had changed, cautious now, like the sergeant had returned. Before I could speak, he grabbed his hat and walked toward the truck. "If they come back, I'll handle it," he said. "But you need to be gone before dark." "Luke." He stopped, hand on the door. For a moment, I thought he'd turn back, say something, anything. But he didn't. He climbed in, the engine roaring to life. I stood in the dirt, the sound fading into the distance, my chest hollow. The man who'd kissed me like he'd been drowning was now the same man driving away to protect the life that was tearing him apart. The storm between us wasn't over. It had only changed shape. The day Luke left, the air shifted. The fields, the sky, even the wind seemed to hum with something heavy and waiting. I couldn't sit still. Every creak of the barn, every sound of an engine in the distance made my heart jump. I didn't know if I was scared of being found or scared of seeing him again. By sunset, I packed my things. My backpack looked smaller than it ever had, carrying just enough to keep moving. But as I zipped it up, headlights cut through the dark. The sound of tires on gravel made my stomach twist. It was Luke's truck. He stepped out, his uniform still on, his face set like stone. But his eyes, they looked different. Torn between duty and something deeper. "Evan," he said. I swallowed hard. "You came back. Get in the barn, now." The tone in his voice made my chest tighten. I followed him inside. The door shut behind us, and the familiar smell of hay and engine oil wrapped around the silence. He turned to face me, his jaw clenched. "They know you're here." My blood ran cold. "Who?" "The sheriff's office. They've been looking for you since last night. Said you ran from a robbery in town." "That's not true," I said quickly. "I didn't do anything." "I want to believe that," he said softly, stepping closer. "But it's not just your word anymore. They've got your name, your license plate, and I've got orders." I stared at him, shaking my head. "You're not going to turn me in." He looked down, his hand brushing the cuffs at his belt. "That's exactly what I have to do." "Luke, please," I said, my voice breaking. "You know me. You've seen me. Does that sound like something I'd do?" He closed his eyes, exhaling slowly. "That's the problem. I do know you, and that's why this is so hard." I stepped closer. "Then don't do it. Tell them I was never here. You think it's that simple?" He said sharply. "If they find out I lied, I lose everything. My job, my name, my rank. You don't get what that means for someone like me." "I don't care about your rank," I said. "I care about you." He flinched as if the words hit harder than a punch. "Don't say that," he whispered. "Don't make this harder than it already is." "Then why did you come back?" I asked. "If you were just going to hand me over, why not let them take me themselves?" He didn't answer. His silence said everything. He had come back because he couldn't let anyone else do it. Because even now, with a badge on his chest, his heart was betraying him. He took a step closer, and for a moment I thought he might cuff me right there. Instead, he stopped inches away, his hand trembling as he reached for my arm. His eyes searched mine, desperate, torn apart. "Evan," he said, his voice barely steady, "if I let you go, they'll come for both of us." "Then let them," I whispered. He stared at me like he was standing on the edge of something impossible. Then his hand fell away. "You don't know what you're saying." "Yes, I do," I said. "I'm saying I'd rather run with you than live knowing you gave me up." He shook his head slowly. "You're just a kid." "I'm not," I said. "Not anymore." "You made sure of that." For a second, his expression cracked. Pain, guilt, and something that looked too much like love. He turned away, bracing his hands on the wooden beam beside him. The muscles in his back moved under the tight fabric of his shirt. His breath shaking. "God help me," he said under his breath. Then, suddenly he spun around, pressing me against the wall, his hands on either side of me. The look in his eyes wasn't anger, it was surrender. "I can't stop thinking about you," he said. "Since that night I've tried to forget, but every time I close my eyes, I see you standing there, and I hate myself for it." "Then don't hate yourself," I said softly. "Just stop fighting it." For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. Then his hand brushed the side of my face, and everything around us fell away. The war in his head, the law, the danger. It was just us, but the moment broke with a flash of red and blue outside. The sheriff's car. Luke froze. "Damn it," he muttered. Voices shouted from outside. "Sergeant Turner! Step out with your hands up." He looked at me, panic flooding his eyes. "They think I'm hiding you." "Because you are," I said. He swallowed hard, pulling the cuffs from his belt. "Evan, I have to make this look real. You have to trust me." Before I could speak, he grabbed my wrists, snapping the cuffs around them, not rough, almost gentle. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice breaking. "They can't know." The door burst open. Two officers entered with their guns drawn. Luke stepped back, his face stone again. Found him in the barn. He didn't resist. The sheriff nodded, signaling one of the men to take me. But before they led me out, I turned to look at Luke. He wouldn't meet my eyes. As they pushed me toward the car, I heard the sheriff's voice behind us. "You did good, Turner. Didn't think you had it in you." Luke didn't answer. That night, as the car drove away from the farm, I looked through the rear window. He was still standing there, his silhouette framed by the light of the barn. The man who had saved me and destroyed me in the same breath, and even through the sting of betrayal. I knew the truth. He hadn't arrested me because he stopped caring. He'd done it because he cared too much. The cell was cold, small, and smelled of iron and old regret. I'd been there for 3 days, counting the cracks in the wall just to keep from thinking too much. But no matter how many times I tried to forget, I kept hearing his voice, that last whisper before they dragged me away. "You have to trust me." Trust him? How could I, when the only thing I had left of him were the bruises on my wrists and the memory of his lips? On the 4th night, the guard banged on the bars. "Visitor," he said. I thought I was imagining it. But when the door opened, Luke was there. He was still in uniform, though he looked different. Tired, hollow, as if every breath cost him something. He walked in slowly, his eyes darting to the guard. "Give us a minute." The guard hesitated, then stepped out, leaving the door ajar. For a few seconds, Luke just stood there, his hands buried in his pockets, his mouth set in a hard line. The silence was unbearable. "You shouldn't have come," I said finally. "I had to." "Why?" "To make sure I'm still alive." He exhaled sharply. "To tell you the truth." I laughed, but it came out dry and cracked. "Now you care about the truth?" He flinched, stepping closer to the bars. "Evan, they were going to charge you with something you didn't do. If I hadn't turned you in myself, they would have found you and killed you. So you saved me by destroying me." I said, "That's what you're calling this?" He ran a hand through his hair, eyes glistening in the dim light. "You don't understand the kind of men I work for. Once they think you're a threat, there's no coming back." "And what about you?" I asked. "You just keep pretending to be one of them?" "I don't have a choice." "Yes, you do." I stepped closer to the bars. "You could have walked away. You could have come with me." His jaw tightened. "And gone where, Evan? Live in hiding, waiting for someone to find us? You think love is enough to survive that?" I met his eyes. "I would have tried. For you." For a moment, neither of us breathed. His eyes flicked down, then up again, searching, desperate. Finally, he said quietly, "I know you would have." Then he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope. He slid it through the bars. "What's this?" "Your release papers," he said. "You're being transferred tonight. New name, new city. You'll disappear for good." My heart stopped. "How did you—" "I called in favors, ones I shouldn't have. It's done. You're helping me escape." He hesitated. "I'm helping you live." I stared at him, realization hitting all at once. "Luke, if they find out what you did, they will." His voice was steady, but his hands trembled. "And when they do, it'll end for me." "No," I said, shaking my head. "No, I'm not leaving you behind." He smiled faintly, that sad, tired smile I'd only seen once before. "You have to." I grabbed the bars, my chest tightening. "Luke, please. We can still—" "Evan." His tone was firm now, but soft enough to break me. "This is the only way I can make it right. You gave me something I didn't think I could feel again. Let me give you something back. A future." Tears burned my eyes. "A future without you isn't one I want." He took a step closer, his face just inches from mine. "You'll want it someday. Then say you'll come with me." He looked away. "I can't." "Say it anyway," I whispered. His eyes met mine again, full of pain, of everything we never got to be. He didn't say the words, but his silence said more than any promise ever could. The door opened behind him. The guard returned. "Time's up." Luke nodded slowly, then turned back to me. "When you walk out of here tonight, don't look back." Luke, but he was already walking away. The sound of his boots echoed down the hallway, like a countdown to something inevitable. That night, just after midnight, the guard who'd been bribed came for me. No lights, no talking. He led me through a side door, handed me the envelope and pointed toward the road. A single truck waited there. Engine off, keys on the seat, a folded jacket draped across the passenger side. Luke's jacket. I climbed in, my hands trembling as I started the engine. The road stretched ahead, empty and endless. But before I could drive, I saw something that made my stomach drop. Red and blue lights in the distance. Then, a single gunshot, echoing through the night. I froze, my throat closing as another shot followed, and then silence. The next morning, the papers said a decorated officer had been found dead behind the county jail. No suspects, no witnesses, just a badge left beside his body. Luke Turner, the man who saved me, even when he couldn't save himself. I drove until the sunrise burned through the fog, until the sky turned gold like the fields around his farm. And when I finally stopped, I put on his jacket, closed my eyes, and whispered the words he never had the chance to say. I love you too.